everybody for coming. We weren't sure, our analytics always say either between 5 and 75 people, so we're never really quite sure what's going to happen. So we coordinated with Levi back here. He owns Trek here. This is a new business, so everybody say hi to Levi. And he said we can use the back, we can use the front, we can do whatever. And I said, we're going to try to cram everybody in the front and see what happens. And this is what has happened. So thank you so much for piling in here. I appreciate it. It's close quarters, but it should be good. We should be able to hear. Everything should be good here. And I'm really excited to hear all these talks. So this is Code Youngstown. There's a bunch of people with Code Youngstown shirts on. That's kind of fun too, huh? Isn't that interesting? If you have a baby or a small child, we have smalls available still, but that's it. So if you want one, let me know. But basically, we act as like a software user group. There's not enough people in Youngstown to have like a Youngstown Python, Youngstown JavaScript, so we just wrangle everybody together and toss them in a room, call it Code Youngstown, and we just do talks and events on all kinds of different stuff. We do lightning talks once a year. We do a social mixer twice a year just to sort of wrangle everybody together and see if we can place people into jobs, if we can make connections, networking, that kind of stuff. And then we do tech talks sometimes. So one thing I want to ask is if you're interested in giving any kind of tech talk, whether it be a 5-minute lightning talk or a 30-minute talk on whatever you're thinking. We've had talks on design, we've had talks on project management, we've had talks on front end, back end, infra, all that kind of stuff. And there's a bunch of people in this room that have already given some talks, so thank you very much. But if you're interested in doing anything else as far as that kind of thing goes, please let us know. Joe and I are open to all kinds of different things. If you have an idea for something we could be doing with Code Youngstown, aside from the stuff we normally do, if you want to splinter a group off, if you want to have a different kind of event, if you have a location, we'd love to do more locations. It's just hard since everybody went remote. You know, it's basically West Side Bowl and whoever else will let us pack people in. Please let us know. Definitely find us on Slack, codeyoungstown.com. It's not on the screen anymore, even though I did this. Codeyoungstown.com. There's a link for the Slack. Join up on the Slack. There's people in there chatting, talking about what they're working on, talking about what problems they're trying to solve. And I think that might be it. Do we have anything else Code Youngstown related?
That feels like everything.
That feels like everything. Okay, cool. Thank you so much for coming. Keep an eye out. We're going to roll through these lightning talks. Joe's going to take that part over. And yeah, food is on us. Drinks in the cooler are on us. Chips, cookies, sandwiches. Levi's back there cranking the coffee machines going if you want something from the bar. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you so much. We're going to get rolling.
Okay, everybody. So if you haven't been to one of these lightning talks before, if you've ever been to another lightning talk event, sometimes they go on and on and on forever. We don't do that around here. I got a 6-minute timer. It's going to be turned on all the way. I'll do like a little wave when you get to about 30 seconds, and hopefully you can finish up by then. So we're pretty strict about this because, you know, the time in between, we'll probably be here for about an hour doing lightning talks, maybe a little bit less, but it'll be a good time. This is my favorite Code Youngstown event of the year, so thank you all for coming, and thank you to our speakers that I'll announce in a second here. So our first talk is Mitch Jacofati. Good enough. Who is a full-stack developer at Embasis Inc., giving a talk on code as continent versus code as island chain, 2 competing ways to architect your application. So without further ado, give Mitch a hand.
Cool. Great. Hi, guys. I don't even have to introduce myself. That's cool. Thanks, Joe and Nick, for having me. Hands up if you've heard the term separation of concerns. Okay, that's a lot of people. I don't know if you've noticed this, but software developers are not just supposed to be engineers these days. They're also supposed to be intellectuals. And they're supposed, nothing's just close to my mouth normally. We're supposed to know all of these weird terms like modularity, encapsulation, separation of concerns, all of these rickety piles of syllables that show up whenever you go on LinkedIn or Twitter. There's going to be someone trying to sound smart by talking about those things. And it's usually very abstract. I decided I wanted to figure out what this meant in concrete terms. And so I came up with an example from the web development that I learned, you know, as a kid in like the 1980s, where you have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML addresses the concern of content. CSS addresses the concern of presentation. And JavaScript addresses logic. And that's how web development works these days, right? Well, I had to relearn it for work recently. And what I found was more like this. The concerns of content presentation and logic are still there, but they're a little bit less separated. Somehow all of the code for a page is like in one place in these layers with like you know, the words and stuff that show up, and also, you know, God knows what else. And it's even worse than that, because at one point, we had, you know, in web development, a server that like would do stuff like store users' data and like share state between clients. And the server would be written in yet another different language, like Java or PHP or Python. But these days, everything is written in JavaScript. And the appeal of Node.js, which lets you run server-side JavaScript, as far as I can tell, is that it de-separates concerns. Once, you know, these things were clearly separated into layers. You had like layers of a stack with like database, backend server, and then your front-end stuff like content and presentation. But now, it's just kind of a mess. Next.js, which is a very popular JavaScript framework, apparently used by 17.9% of web developers this year, according to Stack Overflow, has this thing where you can write the server-side code right in like the same function as the client-side code called server actions. And you know, in web development, the server, no, not good. The server is like some thing on a rack in a data center in Virginia that AWS owns like that. And the client is like code that's running in the background of mobile Safari, you know, on someone's grandma's iPhone in like Rhode Island. And like the fact that you can look at this code and be like, oh yeah, that runs here, and this runs here, and it also is supposed to make sense, I think is a testament to how de-separated concerns are in web development these days. And so I guess my question is, what do we have instead? It used to be that we had layers of a stack, you know, with the database, the server, the front-end stuff. And these days it's more like code is organized into logical units, each containing different logical concerns that people tend to call components. Kind of everything gets called a component, like a page is also a component, you know, in modern front-end web development. And I guess the ultimate question is why? So basically, what I think is the appeal of the first model is that it lets you abstract things away, which just means that you don't have to think about how they work. You know, abstractions and abstracting things away is just another, you know, term that no one explains, but it means you don't have to think about it. And that a database, you know, you'd never have to think about how it works, like ever. Like it's used all throughout all these different apps. And you know, we just kind of make it disappear into a layer of the stack and don't think about it. But with these kinds of logical concerns, it's really difficult to do that. So an example that I have is that in the code base that I have at work, you know, we had these different pages, and we had this function called isAllowedOnPage that's supposed to redirect you away from pages you aren't allowed to be on. And that was supposed to be, you know, a layer that was kind of abstracted away that you didn't have to think about. But what ended up happening is like this. Within that layer, the structure of like the top level logical concerns just reappeared. And so you were replicating kind of the same structure, just in a different place, so that the code that controlled it was harder to get to. This slide was in the template, I just thought it looked cool, so I left it in. And so basically, what I would argue is that technical concerns, like how does a database work, or how does server client communication happening in like a situation like this, where like information is getting from here to here and you don't even see it happening. Like technical concerns are relatively easy to abstract away, so you don't have to think about how they work. But if you try to do that with a logical concern, like should the user be allowed to be on the page they're currently on, not as great a situation. There's an argument that you shouldn't have to, or shouldn't want to think about abstracting away the logical concerns of your app. Like you should want to think about, you know, whether the user is allowed to be on the current page or not. And if you try to avoid that, all you're going to do is end up creating a bunch of complexity like somewhere else that someone has to go and find. And yeah, logical concerns put up a fight instead of letting you abstract them away. And instead of being hidden in layers, they should be surfaced in what I call islands. So we have this old model where a code is a continent, and a new model where it's kind of a series of islands that have a bunch of layers, you know, all to their own, but also probably share bedrock. Like all of these things probably reference the same kind of database. And so what you're deciding when you decide how to organize your code, I went too far, is basically what part of your codes represent logical concerns that should be divided between those top-level islands that correspond to components and pages, and what are the sort of bedrock layers that all of the islands are going to share that you can mostly abstract away from the point of view of any individual island, that you put technical stuff in, like, you know, what is a database and how does it work, and stuff like that. Okay. There we go.
Hi there, my name's Patrick. I'm the co-founder and lead gameplay programmer at RustFit. I do a lot of gameplay programming, and this is my talk about gunplay in games. So, have you ever played a game where the controls didn't feel responsive? Maybe the combat felt empty, or things just felt like overall wrong. Well, I can tell you I have, and that basically comes down to really bad feel. What is feel? Feel in the realm of game design is this fine-tuning of mechanics to elicit a desired emotion or reaction from the player. It's kind of this weird space between mechanics and emotion. So we adjust mechanics in order to create that sort of feeling that we want from the player. And if we have something that feels bad, player emotion is going to be kind of bad or frustrating. And that might not be bad all the time. We might actually want that as game designers. If we want something to be kind of tedious or frustrating to create that satisfaction at the very end of a feeling of success or achievement, this is a potential way of accomplishing that. However, we usually want to make sure that something is satisfying for the player. So why talk about gunplay when it comes to feel? Well, it's a very visceral mechanic in a lot of games. I've got an example here. This is the Odin, which is a heavy machine gun in a game called Valorant. And basically, I want you to pay attention to how slow and clunky the animations are, and how powerful the firing is when dealing damage, and how it's kind of violently shaking and that sort of stuff. Riot did a really good job with kind of making this gun feel really powerful, but also really clunky and heavyweight to use. And kind of going further into how feel iteration and feel works when it comes to gunplay in games, I want to talk about building a kind of in-game revolver. And typically this is going to be based on your game's core mechanics. Are you going to be building a fast-paced run-and-gun type game with high mobility? Are you building a tactical shooter where pinpoint precision is required? Or are you building a horror game that has high suspense and you want it to be kind of a difficult thing to use and put you in a vulnerable place? All of these things are real examples of revolvers that were in different games. They all have different purposes and they're all implemented very differently. There we go. I accidentally skipped a slide. So here's some common gunplay mechanics. We've got our, obviously damage, and our kind of basic stats, things like reload and fire rate, times, and things like that. We also have some accuracy-based ones. We've got spread, which is basically the angle at which a line trace is shot out of specifically a hit scanner. Then we've also got recoil. Recoil could be a visual effect, it could be a simple camera shake, or it could be an actual mechanic in which I might have to pull my mouse down in order to maintain control of recoil. And then also shot feedback and hit feedback. These are going to be animations, particle effects, sound effects that we're playing while we're interacting with this particular gun. I keep skipping slides. So this here is a finite state machine. So basically, when we provide input to the game, the weapon will change to different states. So we have here our idling, which is just sitting there looking at you. And then we've got our firing. I click down the left mouse button, it starts firing, and then reloading. Either I run out or I manually trigger a reload by pressing R on the keyboard. We basically have different components to all of these. I'm going to be focusing on the firing here for most of this. My goodness. Okay, I'm going to start using the arrow keys instead here. So here we go. This is a simple state machine. For our firing state, we have one line trace that fires off for a revolver. We wait usually like 1/10 of a second, or maybe even shorter for that. Again, that's a very field iterated thing. And then keep firing unless we're out of ammo, or we manually stop by releasing that left mouse button. So here's a video of it. Just kidding, that's actually just a static image, because it's not going to look like it's doing anything. We need to add some additional stuff. And here's the change here. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to start consuming ammo manually, and then we're also going to play our shooting animations as well. You can kind of see that was the result of it there. Let's go ahead and let's take a step further. And let's go ahead and let's add in some recoil as well. So now you can start to see in the video here, like it's starting to really come to life. We're starting to see that pop in the camera. We're starting to see those particle effects. We're starting to see there's sound to it. I just don't have sound enabled. And then we also added our reload state. We wired that up, and you can actually see now there's like some interruption and things to the left.
30 seconds.
Okay. And then lastly, field iteration is a very data-driven experience. So what I do when I am making guns for our upcoming game is I usually take a collection of values and I make it very easy to edit them, and I can just change them, try it out, change them, try it out. And it's really just a matter of having fun with it and just figuring out what's going to work best for your game and what sort of mechanics you're impacting when you make your change, those sorts of changes. And that's basically everything.
Yeah.
So hello everyone, my talk is, again, thoughts on making a business by making free, as in freedom software. To start off, as a disclaimer, I am not a lawyer, so don't ask me any legal questions. This is just curiosity on my part. So, so first I'll start with like the different kinds of freedom. So we have free as in beer. So we have plenty of free food and free drinks over here that we can consume. And that's also known as gratis. But we also have free as in freedom. And this is like being able to use something, make changes, resell if you want to resell, and things of that nature. And that's called Libre. So to provide some comparisons of those differences, so there's software where it's free as in beer, but not free as in freedom. So we have X, YouTube, Chrome, where it's software that we can use, but we don't necessarily have the ability to make changes or things like that. But then we have both free, Libre, and gratis. And so that's where we have like Mastodon, PeerTube, and Chromium. These are all open source projects that we can utilize and use for free. But what about a last category where it's not necessarily free as in beer, but it is free for the user to make changes? So let's create a hypothetical scenario of trying to do that. So we have this fantastic idea of Nip Addict, an exclusive platform for pet owners to help their cats break catnip addiction. So in the spirit of Libre, you license the software as AGPL. It's just an open source software license. And in the spirit of your wallet, you charge $5 a month so you can keep maintaining the software. So visitors who visit your, say, your marketing site won't necessarily get access to the software because they're just looking at it. But once someone pays for it, then they can get access to your source code because you're trying to give that power to the user. But after achieving some success, say one of the members that's using your software decides, hey, this is taking off. Let me resell this software for $3 a month instead of $5. What can you do about this? The answer is nothing. So this is the price of freedom. By giving your users the ability to make those changes, learn from your software, they can do what they want depending on the license. And so this freedom, again, it benefits the end user rather than necessarily the producer of the code. So say you still want to make money though on this free software, then there's some other things that you can do, such as always being ahead of the curve as a competitor and continuing to make improvements, and that would create like an authoritative force for your version. You can make it open source and charge for hosting. So think of like WordPress. There's tons of like WordPress hosts, but WordPress itself is open source. And then finally, there's other software licenses out there that allow you to make it free eventually. So as an example, Sentry has this functional source license where after 2 years, it becomes open source. But until then, you can't use it for commercial purposes. But there are other ways also to do freedom and make some money. And so things like trying to get sponsorships, doing content creation, maybe getting grants from the government, or finding an employer who allows you to work on these open source kinds of projects. And with that, that's my lightning talk. So thank you, and be sure to vote if you can in a couple months. Thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Joe Dunko. I'm a co-organizer here at Code Youngstown, and my day job is as an engineering manager of the platform team at BlastPoint, a Pittsburgh-based startup. But on the side, I have this consulting firm called Dev Youngstown that I've talked to a lot of y'all about, and I keep getting questions about it because A, it's terribly named. It is not related to Code Youngstown, it's Dev Youngstown, but it's my consulting firm, and so I thought I'd try to answer as many of those questions in a lightning talk as possible. So what is Dev Youngstown? It's my consultancy firm that specifically partners local students with YBI startups through their MVP development program. So our goal is to give local talented students, student software developers, the 1 year of paid experience they need to be qualified to work remotely from Youngstown, Ohio. So we do this all through the YBI's development program, which is a really tight sponsor of ours. The YBI the development program is a grant-funded initiative for local high-growth tech startups. It's awarded quarterly to a YBI portfolio company, so if you are interested in the grant, you do have to apply first as a portfolio company for the YBI, then for the grant. The budgets are typically between 10 and 20K, typically matched by the startup. So for example, if the YBI offers you 10K, you typically match another 10K, and that turns it into 20K. What's really cool is that all the budget goes towards the student developers, some of which are in the audience today, and the server costs. And none of it actually goes towards me. The YBI actually pays me directly by the hour to manage the program, as well as consult with you as one of the YBI startups. So it helps us lengthen the amount of time that budget lasts for. So some things about working for Dev Youngstown: we have a 2-step interview process, phone screening, and then a code walkthrough of something you've worked on before. The pay starts at $15 an hour and increases $2.50 an hour per semester, up to $20 an hour, kind of an incentive to try to keep students around for a year. It is 1099 though, so it is contract work, so most students don't pay much taxes at the end of the year, but you have to save up a little bit to pay your taxes at the end of the year. We do promise a minimum of 15 hours a week. However, if you, a lot of the time we have a little bit of extra budget, so it could be up to 20, 25, depending on thing, and I'd really like to get it up to full-time next summer, so that could be really cool. And it is fully remote, so we occasionally do dinner together like once a year or something, but otherwise all remote. So working for Dev Youngstown still, all communications via Discord. A lot of students are used to Discord. It's a good place for having that. We have a weekly stand-up every Monday, and then once a week I meet with every student just to kind of give them some one-on-one time, talk about what things they're working on, career stuff, all of that kind of stuff. Those are the only sync meetings we have unless we plan something specifically for a project. And then we plan all of our work through a central GitHub project that keeps track of tasking. So all of our issues, we have one repo per customer. They're all mono repos. Those are where their issues are stored, and then we have like a central GitHub repository that collects all those issues in the work for the week. So if you are a client for Dev Youngstown, how it kind of looks like is we have weekly meetings, progress check-ins, demos, etc., etc. We give you access to that code repository from day one. I'm not a big fan of consultancy companies that keep the code hostage. You're paying for it. It's your code. You should have access to it. And from day one, we make sure you have documentation, types, everything, so that it's ready for handoff. And, Dev Youngstown is not meant to be, your permanent dev partner, that we're willing to work with you. However, our goal is to build an MVP so you can get customers, raise more funding, and then we can hand it off to someone who's either full-time for you or a bigger consultancy firm or whatever. So our process, first we create a scope. We define typically 2 or 3 core features. We then do a UI design, typically in Figma, based on, we usually use Material UI for that. Then we design an MVP, or excuse me, an API design, and from that informs the database design. And then we execute that kind of in a waterfall style. And then once we have like a basic MVP, we then turn into like an iteration process with the rest of your budget to improve based on hopefully customer feedback. So agile iterations after that. So our tech stack, Python, we use FastAPI as our framework. It's treated us pretty well. Postgres, we host on Northflank. It's like a Docker-based container thing. React, MUI for front end. Our tools, we use GitHub. We give all the students access to Copilot, Sentry for error collecting, Postmark for emails, Figma for all of our design work. And the business side is all QuickBooks Online, and then Harvest for keeping track of hours and billing people. So 3 asks for y'all today. First, we'll be hiring at least 1 student in December, probably 2, so keep an eye out for that. Probably start to look in November. We have a former student, Garrett, who I don't think made it today, who is looking for his first full-time gig. So please, if you're hiring a Python JavaScript developer, he's super bright, I'd love to connect you. And then lastly, we do have a developer and a designer entering the job market in December, so maybe if you're not hiring now, hit me up. I'd love to introduce you to them and maybe line something up in December. My email is joe@youngstown.dev. Thank you for having me.
Hi everyone, I'm Michael, and today I'd like to talk to you about some questions that you can ask yourself when you're thinking about bringing a co-founder into your company. I have a lot of trauma in this. I've been through 3 startups, I've been through multiple co-founders, and yeah, there's a lot of things you want to consider. So the first is like, why even care about what type of co-founder you want to bring on? If you're starting a business, you definitely want to care. Like, you're probably going to be working with the co-founder for like multiple years to come, and let me tell you, they're extremely difficult to get rid of because they own a part of your company. So you can't just like get rid of them later if things start going really badly. Like, you have to like vote them out, and you have to like pay them probably proportional to how much of the company they own. So like, it can be extremely painful. And that's especially painful if that person is like a friend or family member. So if you're considering bringing like someone like that on for a co-founder, you probably don't want to be the guy that's like, yeah, I don't really think my friend is worth 15% of my company anymore. So let's get into these questions. So first question is, and this one you really want to think about, do they even really want to be a founder? So the thing is that being a founder is way more responsibility than being an employee. You're basically responsible for charting the entire direction of the company, and like, it requires a lot of leadership skills, and you're taking on a lot of risk. You're going to be working a lot of hours for something that may not pay off for a really long time, if at all. And you need to be someone who's capable of doing a lot of creative problem solving, someone who's capable of like working independently without supervision. And to be honest, most people don't want that level of responsibility. Most people just want like a cool job, which they might make a good employee, but probably aren't going to be a very good founder. So the second question is there inexperience? Is it in an area that they can easily grow into? So the thing is that being inexperienced in some areas is actually okay. When I started to become a founder, I was like really skilled at programming, but a lot of the more foundery things, like having to like manage people and do long-term thinking, and a lot of things that like really push my skill set beyond just engineering, like those were things I had to step into. So if it's something like that, that's okay. But if the skills that they're lacking are something that require years to master, like learning programming or learning to be like an accountant or something, like that's probably not a very good fit for being a startup founder, because it takes so much time and learning to focus on the like hard technical skills. So, and the thing is that like, you can't really trust other people to like accurately evaluate their own skills. They might lie about it. There are a lot of grifters out there. Or they might be like not quite aware enough to accurately rate them. You need to be very good at observing people and seeing like what are their skills actually. So, and the thing is that if growing into this required skills requires changing the unchangeable, like changing their temperament into being a leader and someone who's patient when they're actually not, like that probably is not going to happen. So the next question is, how would you feel about getting into an argument with this person? So surprise, surprise, startups are extremely stressful at times. They need to be able to handle stress well, and they need to be able to work under pressure. So can you, as the person bringing them on, can you separate personal and business matters? Like, especially if it's like a friend, you know, like I work with my boyfriend as in my startup, but like not everyone can work with their significant other like that, especially like when things come down to like money and compensation, and it's like, you know, you have to ask, can your personal relationship with them survive a very big disagreement in business matters? And when it comes down to having a conflict, can this person admit that they're wrong? Like, do they win arguments by overpowering people instead of based on the like merits of their arguments? Or do they avoid conflict altogether? I've known people who just wind up ghosting me for like 3 days because they didn't want to like have a difficult discussion with me. And then some people just like agree with everything you say is another way to avoid conflict. And like it can feel really good being like, oh yeah, you know, we're on the same page. They agree with everything I say. But the truth is, if you're trying to build a good product, like you're not going to get that if you're in an echo chamber. You need honest feedback. My next point is, how would you feel if they were your boss? Because yeah, and you know, you start off being like co-founders, but eventually you're going to need to scale the company. You're going to be bringing in other people who you'll need to convince to make them want to work for you. And so the question is like, is this an abrasive person? Do they seem insensitive to other people's feelings? Sometimes the very traits that make you good at doing a startup can make you bad at like working with other people. And you know, you need to ask, do they have a hard time listening? Do they have a hard time like considering other people's perspectives? See, like a lot of problems are really only visible to the people doing the work who are down in the trenches. You need to be able to have people feel comfortable being honest about what the problems they're facing are. If they don't have the psychological safety to like report that up to the chain to you, then like your company is going to suffer. So you need that psychological safety to do the best work. And good working relationships are absolutely critical for a startup. A bad team culture will really stifle your innovation. And then finally, if you got hit by a bus, what would happen to the company after your probable-ish recovery? You know, as a founder, the buck does stop with you, but it can't just stop with you. Like, they need to take on the same level of responsibility as a co-founder. So while you were gone in this hypothetical bus scenario, like, do they take the initiative they need to solve problems? Or do they wait around to just be told what to do? How are they without supervision? Do you trust them to be responsible and honest?
Time.
Damn.
Thank you, Michael.
Yep.
I just keep like giving talks that are like code adjacent, but they're not really about code. They're just sort of public service announcements that everybody should listen to because I think I know things. Maybe I don't. I don't know anything. Hi, I'm Nick. I'm a data hoarder. So my talk's about data hoarding and why you should be a data hoarder. Maybe not to my level because I have issues. That's sort of the culmination of my addiction in my basement. We hang out down there sometimes. Mirrored unraid servers. I probably have 300 terabytes raw of just drives sitting at my house. Why do we hoard? The internet's disappearing. Oh my God. All of our favorite useful websites, classic forums. Think about forums. Remember forums? They're gone. Social networks. Remember Twitter? What happened there? I don't know, but it's going down the drain. Half of YouTube videos live in 2010 are no longer available. Think about that. All your favorite bands, all the stuff you went and favorited. Go look at your favorites list on YouTube. All that shit's gone. Internet Archive just lost a legal battle. They were lending people books and everybody got all huffy about it and they lost that battle, which means they're probably going to lose more and people are going to come after them. Think about the Wayback Machine. That shit's just a giant piece of copyright lawsuit, essentially, on the internet. So, you know, just be aware that these things aren't online forever. If you cherish things, if you need things for documentation like I do, if you hoard concert recordings like I do, you should go back that stuff up. And the sort of method of doing that, and by the way, I'm last and least, so I'm going to talk for like 40 minutes. Joe can't stop me, so FYI. So the method for doing this is sort of code adjacent. It's web scraping. A lot of web developers in here, I use wget, I use HTTrack, I scrape entire websites, entire forums down to static content, I then JS optimize it, collapse it down, minify it, and then I throw it on my server, and you can throw it up on S3 and just browse it however you like. I've done that 1,000,000 times. There's scripts. I write Python scripts constantly to just go scrape websites, to go scrape the live music archive on the Wayback Machine on Internet Archive. I scraped all the Vindy.com videos when the Vindicator was closing, and then they threatened to sue me. That wasn't very fun. And then there's coding. There's taking rsync or rclone, shooting all that data to your other backup server that you have in your basement, right? Shooting all that data up to AWS S3 Glacier, in case your house burns down. There's coding involved here, so it's kind of interesting. You might like it. Backups are the most important thing that you should think about and take from this talk. Look into the 3-2-1 backup rule, which basically says 3 copies of data, 2 different formats, and 1 offsite. And offsite these days is almost always like just a cloud backup of some sort. Hard drives die. Like if you have a single external hard drive, it's going down, man. Like get ready. Houses burn down. There, now if you don't have a remote backup, all your data's gone. What's the point of living if all your data's gone? Think about it. okay? Stay away from SSD external hard drives, the little tiny ones. You know, if it's on a big honking, you know, giant magnetic 3.5 drive, it's not going to hold data long term. They're not good for cold storage. Flash memory is the same thing. You know, if you don't have a charge on them all the time, they actually start to bit rot, they bit flip, things like that. You could lose your files. Suspiciously large wish.com style flash drives, that drive's not 20 terabytes, I don't care.
What?
It was $5, I know, but you're gonna get it. What it does is it writes data to the front, and then it deletes the data in the back, so you think you have 20 terabytes, but it's just dumping it. It's awesome. Lifetime cloud storage, that's a scam, come on. So I just want to go over a couple common setups that I recommend to people. I'm recommending to you. Go home, think about it. Small setups, like under 12 terabytes. You know, 12 terabyte drives are pretty common. They're even small. Get an internal hard drive plus an external offsite. Take that offsite, take it to your fiance's house, your parents' house. WD Easy Stores are my favorite. Or do an external hard drive plus a cloud backup. You write to one, and then cloud backups immediately. Now you have an offsite. AWS S3 Glacier, Backblaze, Personal, all that kind of stuff. Medium size, I really like these. Do a RAID 1 on your at-home system. And that way if you lose a drive, you're fine. Do a cloud backup. Do a small NAS, you know, RAID 1 with Synology. You get that plus a cloud backup. You can do Dockers, VMs, apps, all that stuff. Large data, you get into 3 drives, 4 drives, you can do RAID 5, RAID 6, lose a couple drives and your data's still there. Synology 4-bay disk stations, do a cloud backup. These are cool. This one website forum has these NAS killer setups. Basically just build your own system, shove a bunch of hard drives in it, and do the same exact thing. Unraid or TrueNAS are your good options here. That's in my basement. Multiple servers, rack mount disk shelves. These are disk shelves, they're not servers. They just connect to the servers on the backplane. EMC or NetApp disk shelves are very common. Unraid TrueNAS for these giant systems still, you know, at least for home use. I don't know what the big boys are doing. Unraid TrueNAS pros, cons. These are the ones I always recommend. I use Unraid. You don't actually install it. It's kind of cool. It just lives on a flash drive. You can lose 2 drives and you still have your data, and the data is still available while you're using it. It's expandable storage on the fly. I write a ton of data. I want to be able to just add drives, pop them in, keep going. It costs money for the OS. There's a license, and there's no data integrity at the OS level, which kind of sucks. You manage it yourself. You do checksums yourself. TrueNAS is the other big one. It's traditional install. They have these RAID Z2, RAID Z3. You can lose up to 3 disks at once, and it'll actually still maintain your data. You pop 3 new disks in, it rebuilds it, you don't lose anything. The only issue is it's non-expandable storage. If you have 100 terabyte RAID Z3 VDEV and you want to like use 101 terabytes now, you have to go make an entire new VDEV of several drives to do it, which kind of sucks, which is kind of why I'm on Unraid. But it is free and it has ZFS as the file storage, which is really awesome because it has data integrity at the file system level. And actually when you run scrubs against your entire data, it will see that a bit has flipped and it will actually fix it for you, which is kind of crazy. So bit flips happen. Those are your options. There's some kind of thing happening where Unraid's trying to get ZFS into their system. I don't know if that's going to work. It feels very sketchy, but I'm going to try it. That's it. Go check Data Hoarder subreddit, Home Lab subreddit for all kinds of different scripts, all kinds of different setups. Thank you very much.